Welcome to another episode of FinStecks. Today we will discuss Apple's strategic move in response to Trump's new tariff policy. According to Reuters, Apple has strategically airlifted approximately 600 tons of iPhones from India to the United States, equivalent to about 1.5 million devices, in an effort to circumvent potential tariff increases proposed by President Donald Trump. India's role in iPhone production. India has emerged as a crucial manufacturing hub for Apple's iPhones, with the country's production capacity rapidly expanding. Currently, India contributes 10 to 15% of global iPhone assembly, with plans to increase this to 25% by 2025. Apple's shift towards India is driven by several factors. Diversification from China. Apple aims to reduce its reliance on Chinese manufacturing amid geopolitical tensions and rising labor costs. Tariff advantages. India faces lower U.S. tariffs, 26%, compared to China, 54%, and Vietnam, 46%, making it an attractive production base. Government incentives. India's Make in India initiative and production-linked incentive (PLI) scheme have encouraged Apple's expansion in the country. Growing production capacity. Foxconn plans to double iPhone production in India to 30 million units by 2025, while overall iPhone production in India could reach $34 billion by 2026 to 27. This strategic shift not only benefits Apple but also supports India's ambitions to become a global electronics manufacturing powerhouse. Let's switch mics with our experts for deep dive.
Okay, so the material you shared about Apple and the whole tariff situation, it really makes you think, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's a fascinating look at how these big global trade policies shake things up for companies we all know.
Exactly, and how it affects the phones in our pockets. So let's try and unpack what Apple's actually doing about these Trump-era tariffs.
Right.
The sources really pointed to two main things: moving manufacturing around and what that means for prices.
Yeah, those are the key angles. It really shows how a giant company like Apple has to, pivot when the rules change, and sometimes pivot pretty fast.
Okay, so let's start with the manufacturing side. It sounds like India is becoming much more important for them.
Oh, definitely. India's really stepped up as a major alternative to China for putting iPhones together.
Why India specifically? Is it just cheaper?
Well, the big driver is the tariff difference. Think about it. Potentially 125% tariff on stuff coming in from China versus, just 26% for imports from India?
Whoa, okay. 125 versus 26%. That's not even close.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It makes the decision almost financially obvious if you can make the logistics work.
And it sounds like Apple didn't just wait around hoping it would work. They were pretty active in India.
Extremely active. This wasn't just a passive shift. They apparently put a lot of effort into lobbying, specifically for something called a green corridor at Chennai Airport.
A green corridor? What does that do?
Basically, it streamlines customs. And they had, pretty dramatic results. The time it took to clear customs for their stuff reportedly dropped from about 30 hours.
30 hours? Wow.
Yeah, down to just 6 hours.
6? Okay, that's a massive improvement, especially when you're shipping millions of phones.
Exactly. That kind of efficiency gain is crucial for a company operating at Apple's scale. It shows they're not just reacting, they're actively trying to shape the conditions on the ground.
Makes sense. So do we know how much of the U.S. iPhone supply is actually coming from India now? Like, what percentage are we talking?
The information we looked at suggests it's around 20% now.
20% already. That feels like a pretty significant chunk pretty quickly.
It is. It shows how seriously they're taking this diversification, primarily, because of those tariffs on Chinese goods.
Okay, so manufacturing is shifting. Got it. But the question I think a lot of people have is, what about the price? Are these tariffs going to make iPhones way more expensive?
That's definitely the $1 million question, or maybe the $2,000 question in this case.
Right.
The sources gave a pretty stark example. If Apple had to swallow that whole 125% tariff on, say, an iPhone 16 Pro Max made in China, the price could theoretically jump from around $500 to $2,599 to potentially $2,300.
Oof. $2,300? That's a huge leap. That would price a lot of people out.
It certainly would. So avoiding that kind of sticker shock is obviously a high priority for them.
So how are they managing that then? Is it just the shift to India?
That's a big part of it, definitely. Making more of the U.S.-bound phones in India avoids that massive 125% tariff hit right off the bat.
Okay.
But it also seems like they might be using other tactics, too. The reports mentioned building up inventory here in the U.S.
Ah, stockpiling them.
Sort of. It could be a way to, create a buffer, give them some breathing room against immediate price hikes while they continue to ramp up production in India and maybe explore other options. Seems like a multi-layered strategy.
Right, makes sense. So pulling it together, it sounds like the main story here is Apple is really actively moving production, especially to India, to get around these high tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
And a key reason for doing that is to try and keep iPhone prices from, well, exploding for customers here in the States.
Precisely. It's fundamentally about managing costs to stay competitive in their biggest market, adapting the whole supply chain.
Yeah, it really highlights how these big trade decisions filter all the way down to the gadgets we use. Okay, so here's something to maybe think about after this. If global trade policies can cause these kinds of ripples, forcing companies like Apple to make such big changes, what other types of strategies might companies use, maybe ones we haven't seen yet, when they face similar disruptions down the road? What else is in their toolkit?
That's a great question, something definitely worth pondering.